Varner with the Low Back Fix. We are inside beautiful Bear Republic today talking about some rowing form. Biggest problems we start seeing with people is they start to get a little knee dominant, a little squatty on their rowing form. What we want to think about is functional movement, so it's always the same thing, big joint to little joint. Start with our hips, then our knees come in, and then we get into the ankles. So the biggest flexion in this one in a hinging pattern is going to be the deep hip flexion. Not so much in the knees and very little in the ankles. So if you see yourself getting too far forward with a big knee flexion, we've gone too far. We need to slow things down a little bit and get a little bit more hingy. I like to think about the rowing stroke being a lot like a power clean, where we're getting that big hip drive and that whip through, but the arms aren't doing a whole ton here. So we need to make sure we're keeping a nice tight midline, driving out of those heels. Let's go and check a couple out. So we're here, getting set, feet come in, and we're just going to be thinking about that start position, right? So, nice neutral spine, everything stays nice and tight here. Feet are gonna be locked in, and you can see not so much in the knee flexion here as much as in the hip, right? So that big drive, finishing here. It's all in the legs, and when we come back, this is going to be the part that we really have to focus on, right? The arms come out, hip, then slight knee bend, drive, and finish. Hip, knee, drive. So, all the way in. What we want to think about, you can start to get a nice little rhythm here when you're rowing, where we think hands, hips, knees, drive. Hands, hips, knees, drive. Hands, hips, knees, drive. When we start to see people do this thing wrong, what we're really seeing is that big knee flexion, right? So you get into that squatty pattern that we're talking about, and what it looks like, we're gonna set this down, what it starts to look like is that knee breaks first. So instead of it being hands, hips, knees, we start going hands, knees, and you see what instantly happens. The slide starts to come way far up here. Our ankle or our heels come off the board. And now we're in this squatty pattern. Everything's messed up because of that functional movement principle. Hips, knees, ankles, big joint, little joint, smaller joint. We start breaking that, and all of a sudden things start to lose a lot of power. We start pulling out of our low back, right? Because the knee is going to be connected to that low back. That's going to be our big mover. If you're ever experiencing back pain when you're rowing, this is going to be the #1 thing that you want to think about. Are you adhering to functional movement patterns? Big joint to little joint, hip, knee, ankle, right? So we're here, and those knees come forward, it's going to force us to bend a little bit more, and then we pull out, right? Everything's here, hands, hips, then the knees, and drive. And a couple drills before we even think about the drive is we can just play this over without the arms coming through, and you're gonna notice that you're able to keep pretty good power on the wheel without even the arms coming through. And then we can add the arms, and it's big leg drive, finish into our belly. The hands, hips, knees, drive. No matter what, anytime we're on any apparatus, anytime we're doing anything, it's always adhering to the functional movement standards, right? Big joint, it's gonna be our hips. Little joint, it's gonna be our knees. Smallest joint's gonna be our ankles, right? Hands come out, the hip moves next, then the knees, slight bend in our ankles, drive out of the legs. Gonna add more power, keep your low back safe. Thanks for hanging out. See you guys next week.